will go ahead and have the president of the Urban Jackson League here in Jacksonville begin. He will go ahead and introduce himself, how long he's been president here in Jacksonville. And once we have introduced everyone, then we can go ahead and finish watching the video from the beginning.
Great. Good evening to all of you. It's just so wonderful to be with you this evening here at Registration Roundup, Why Black Men Should Vote. And we have a distinguished panel here this evening. And I know several of them, and I want to personally thank all of you for participating with us. And when I think about your topic this evening, I think back to April 4th, 1968. And you know how important that date is. That was the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered, assassinated. And it was also the date that I was in the rice paddies of Vietnam. So I have many, many reasons why voting is extremely important. And so I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. I know we'll hear some great information. Thank all of you participating. Thank all of you at the Jacksonville Urban League. And I see Ms. Finley back there and Dwight and Errica, all of you. Dennis, thank you so much. And let's get this show on the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Danford. We'll go ahead and see if any of our panelists want to offer them to go first, and then we can go from there. Who wants to introduce themselves first?
Errica, I'll start out. First of all, it is a very, very big pleasure, honor for me to be here as a part of this event with my mentor, my friend, and I have to tell his daughter, Faith, I claim him as dad too, Richard Danford. Dr. Danford is one of the reasons why I'm in the place that I am in my life right now. And what's so important is that people of color, if at no time in our lives, we have to vote today. The reason it's so important to me, I grew up as a part of the Jacksonville Urban League. The chair, we came together with the National Urban League Youth Conference, and a group of us came and created that. So we were able to stand on the shoulders here in Jacksonville of people like Clenzel T. Brown and Ronnie Ferguson and other leaders who came together to make a difference here. But as a child, I saw them making a difference. And so I went on to be a part of the National Urban League under John Jacob and Hugh Price and so many other great leaders. And so I'm here today as someone who's been a former elected official, a former TV news anchor reporter, currently a college professor and researcher at Edward Waters College. But what I'm committed to and passionate about is about changing the community. And that foundation of being intellectually curious and being a part of this community came from my involvement with the Urban League. So we don't have a choice, as you heard from that brief snippet of the video we heard, and you heard history speaking when you heard Dr. Danford talk about fighting in the rice paddies so that we could have freedom. We don't have a choice, especially as Black men, not to vote. We must vote, and we must make sure that everybody around us votes. So I'm looking forward to this panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and go to Mr. Yendrick. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. Good afternoon, good evening. Yandrick Parazon. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, native New Yorker. And I am an organizing manager for the National Urban League. Very honored to be here today to speak on this topic. It's as we're all going to say tonight, it's the most important election of our lives. We've been saying this forever, but this is, hard fact, the most important time for us as Black males to participate in this election greater than we ever have. I think back to my family were Haitian, were from Haiti. My mother and father are from Haiti, and they moved to New York, and took some time to gain their citizenship. Ever since then, this was 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and have never missed an election. Um, so they understand how important it is, and for someone like
Hi,
that,
good evening. My name is Jackie. I'm with the National Urban League. We're calling for Nathaniel Daniels.
um,
Oh, okay. Is Sandra Daniels available? Hi,
Hi,
how,
can everyone please mute their phone
oh,
if you,
how are you today?
Yandra, you were speaking. My apologies for muting you. I had to mute everyone, but can you please start back from what you were saying?
yeah, absolutely. Well, just again, just honing in on the importance of the election, importance of us electing, of us voting this year. And so we'll dig into it. We'll dive into it. But I'm happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Whaley, do you mind chiming in? How are
Good
you?
evening. I'm wonderful. Good evening. I am Chauncey Maurice Whaley, a mass communication scholar hailing from Jacksonville, Florida, and I attend Edward Waters College. First of all, it's a pleasure and thank you for the invite for me to be in here this evening. As a 35-year-old man, I know that I stand on the shoulders of great men and women who have fought through the civil rights movement for me to have the opportunity to vote. When I think about Selma, Alabama back in 1965, as I look back and think about the bridge they had to cross blooded to recross it again, I realized that my voice matters most when I cast a ballot. And as a young man, I realized that's the power that I hold most. So yes, it's very important for Black men to vote. It's discouraging to realize the Black men don't realize their power. But I'm excited about dialoguing with you all this evening so we can discuss this matter to the masses so we can mobilize them to vote on November 3rd.
Thank you so much. Mr. Glover, how are you doing?
Doing well. Hey, good afternoon, Jacksonville. My name is Danny Glover, and I bring you greetings from the Mile High City on behalf of Mayor Michael B. Hancock. And I'm extremely excited to be a part of this important conversation today. When it comes to the actual political organizing, when it comes to actually working with those folks who were so working in overtime at this point to turn out, I've been involved in that work for over the last, the last decade, organizing in states all over the South, from Denver, to Delaware. So I'm excited to be here. I hope I can add some value to the conversation, and it's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thank you so very much. And I want to say, Mr. Singleton, how are you doing?
I'm good. Philip Singleton, the hip hop lobbyist. I am a professional lobbyist in the state of Florida, also senior advisor to Congressman Al Lawson. But none of my views or positions will be candidate or campaign specific tonight. I've been working in the political process for about 12 years now. Started as unpaid intern, and really trying to work my way up the process, and really as one of the few Black lobbyists in the state, really having a hold on the issues of what really drives the narrative of policy and how that is actually structured, and how we push a narrative of constructive policy and resources that will benefit our community, instead of having the continued narrative of protests or unstrategic movements that don't really push the narrative forward for our community. So that's what I've done for the past 12 years. Recently moved to Jacksonville 2 years ago, from Palm Beach for the most part. Went to Florida A&M University, and only thing I don't like about Jacksonville is the Danes Bridge. But besides that, it's a great community, a great place to be right now.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome to Jacksonville. I'm sure you have been to each part and see how we actually organize things around here.
Yes.
Last but not least, we'll have Mr. Jalen speak and introduce himself. How you doing?
Doing good. Thank you guys for having me with you this afternoon, or this evening rather. Name is Jalen Herbin. Bringing greetings from Charlotte, North. Carolina, where I currently serve as a district liaison for a member of Congress, as well as I am an HBCU advocate, millennial advocate, podcast producer, as well as a national organizer for the National Urban League. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. I feel that it's important for Black men to vote solely because there's a lot on this ballot for us as an individual, but also to bring forth and bring back to our community as well, from food insecurity to child education, criminal justice reform, and the list goes on and on. But as a Black man, we are the root of our community. And so for us to be vocal, it first starts with us going back in and casting our ballot first in order to make any change.
Awesome. I'm so happy everyone is here and we have all been able to come together in unison to make sure that this event is actually happening tonight. As we all know, today is the last day for voters registration. So this movement is in place so we can see if we can get more people that may be watching this Facebook Live or that may join this webinar, may have a friend that they know that has not registered, and this may push them to go out and register either on their phones, or we'll find a way to make sure that they're actually out there on November 3rd to go out there and vote. So Dwight, did you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dwight James III, recent graduate of Florida State University, but I'm currently the Civic Engagement Specialist for the Jacksonville Urban League. I just want to thank everybody for coming out here and fellowshipping with us.
Awesome. Now, is the video buffered completely? Do you know, so we can watch this?
Yes.
Awesome. So while we're watching this video, if anybody wants to invite their friend on Facebook or on the Zoom, that would be great.
And I'm going to start it from the second student that's speaking.
Okay. Or you can begin it. You can start from the beginning. Some was not here to participate on the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Has a moral responsibility, if we are the voting age and if we are registered, to participate in that decision. So I come to California today, and I'll leave here and go to Chicago and then to Detroit and then Baltimore, Maryland, and New York to say the same thing. I come here to urge every person under the sound of my voice to go to the polls on the 3rd of November and vote your conviction. Now, I know you're intelligent people, and I don't need to tell you who you should vote for. I don't have any fear about that. You know who to vote for. I'm just asking you to vote. Now, just if you need
I believe voting is important because it's a right that should be guaranteed to all people, whether you're out here or you're in the pen. I think a right for everybody that should be exercised by everyone. And the reason why it's important is because we have the authority to choose those who govern us, and we should exercise that authority without anybody missing out. We've been taught it doesn't matter about our vote. Our votes don't matter. Our vote won't matter. When we do vote, whatever we say is going to get passed up. But in reality, it does. When we don't show up, somebody's happy. And that's what I've been trying to stress years since I've been able to have a voice to advocate.
It's always very important to vote, especially this election. And as we see with the current current selection for the Supreme Court, this is a woman who wants to overturn Obamacare. and basically deny almost 10 million Americans the right to health care, to affordable health care. So it's very important to vote, not just on the national level, but also statewide elections and city and county elections. Because that's where it starts.
I think one of my favorite quotes I use whenever I talk about older generation and younger generation is that those who criticize our generation forgot who raised it. So in the aspect, a lot of older people, one, they don't have enough patience to deal with the younger people. Even myself, I'm not that older, but even younger people than me sometimes are like, all right, now go about your business. But I think we have to regain that patience and understand that, hey, in order to save us, we got to help us. And I think that we just, well, the kids don't care, or they don't do that. No, you have to go back and take the baby step because somebody helped you. So it's important that you help somebody else.
I think we need more voter education. I think we need more voter our communities so that they can understand that one vote can make the difference. It doesn't matter. That one vote may be the difference in a policy change. That one vote can be the difference of the right person getting into those seats and into the White House. Your one vote counts and it matters.
Well, the older generation is still our leaders. Even though they are phasing out by numbers, they are yet stood by elders and our leaders. What we need for the older generation to remind us is that the spirit of what they did our age still resides and impart those wisdom into us. That's one of the reasons why I greatly respect and admire the late Congressman John Lewis. To his very end, no matter his age, he gave the same spirit he has as a 20 and a 23-year-old back in the 1960s and carried that spirit because he wanted to impart that to young people. So when the older generation imparts to the young generation the same spirit and fight, that will give in the gap because allow the younger generation to tell the older generation, this is what we're going through now. And the older generation give the wisdom to the younger generation, this is how you need to fight.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. What did you guys think about this video? Anyway, this is an open discussion. So I want everyone to feel comfortable with being able to voice their opinion. As we say, this is a live discussion. We wanted to get everybody's opinion. I am a female, so my opinion may be viewed differently than the male's opinion. So if anybody wants to interject and give us a quick opinion on what they feel from this video really was, it pretty much, oh my gosh, the words are not coming out. What they think in this video captured them when it comes to males going out to vote.
I can jump in. I think the video was spot on. Those individuals that spoke captured a lot. They talk about one vote counts. During the 2016 election, if an additional 400,000 Blacks voted in the key states of Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, if you were voting for Hillary Clinton would have won that election. She won the popular vote by 2.9 million votes, lost the electoral college by 76 votes. So 400,000 Blacks in those key states. And so it's the notion that your vote does not count, that it's not going to matter, is really an old, archaic, outdated thought, and needs to be destroyed. Needs to be destroyed.
Anyone else? Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I did send out a questionnaire agenda about what we would be talking about. I had the panelists pretty much go back and read these questions and think about how they grew up. We have some questions on who introduced them from when they were the age of 2 to 3 to about 10, 11. And then we have an experience that they may have had from the age from preteen all the way till, they're young adults. And then now we're going to try to share with them as well what they have viewed between, them graduating from high school and becoming, a man in the society. So from the questions, who in your life from childhood has pretty much made a staple experience on to go out there and to vote as a man?
I'd like to go first. My mother has made an influence in me in voting. I can remember the first time that I experienced the voting process as a 10-year-old. Back in 1995, Nathaniel Glover was running for sheriff of the city of Jacksonville. I was living on 439 West 26th Street, and my mother had to go vote at the fire station right on Main Street. Seeing in 1995 how people was excited about seeing African American running for sheriff in the city of Jacksonville, it engaged a lot of people. So seeing her going out to vote and making a reason to vote inspired me to say, I can't wait till I vote one day. And I know I had another 8 years to go at that particular time. And as a teenager, how it inspired me was the US presidential election of 2000. I was currently in my sophomore year at Rains High School when Al Gore made the visit to Jacksonville at Rains High School to go into our gym and speak about it. And the turnout of that election, we all know the 2000 election was active in the state of Florida, hanging chads. So I knew then, I can't wait till 3 years come until I vote. And then I got my opportunity in 2003 when Nat Glover was not rerunning for sheriff, but running for mayor of the city of Jacksonville. And that's the first time I voted. I remember how disappointed I was that he was not elected, but I was happy that I was excited about voting for the first time. And that just compelled me to continue to vote because I knew then my vote mattered.
Awesome. Anyone else want to share their experience from who influenced them to go out and vote from a young child?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Danny.
All right, I appreciate it. But this is actually a story I enjoy sharing a lot. I actually oftentimes tell it as one of the best experiences and also one of the worst experiences because it diametrically changed my life from that point moving forward. So my grandfather was the first African-American groundskeeper at our local ballpark in Macon, Georgia, my hometown. And at an early age, I was exposed to politics just by going to the parks with him and seeing him kind of will and deal with the local ball players, those city council persons who we had to fight oftentimes for a budget. But I remember specifically one day, there was trash outside his office. I said, Granddad, are you going to call your janitor since you're the boss man to, come pick up this trash? And he said, son, whenever you recognize something that's being a problem, that problem becomes yours to fix. And from that point forward, I've just been running around the city, running around the state, trying to solve those problems. So, and since then, I found that early exposure, to, I guess, viewing problems not as issues, but as opportunities to fix, it's changed my civic outlook. It changed the way I'm involved in the community. It changed, how I deal with people. So I want to thank, the late Willie Smokey Glover for that introduction.
And I think just to piggyback off of sort of that story, my first experience was ultimately with my family. Seeing that my family were the ones to go out and cast their vote every year. My dad made sure he'll go vote before he had to go to work. My mom the same way. And so it sort of resonated with me like, okay, I need to go vote also. And then it wasn't until got to high school, senior year of high school, I'm looking at, oh, okay, this is President Obama's election year, re-election year. I'm gonna be able to go out and vote. But the way my birthday is set up, I didn't turn 18 until the month after election day. But during that same time, I actually had a civil studies teacher, one of my coaches for football. He used to have this thing called Chicken Noodle Soup Fridays, and we were going over Black history, but it was really outside of Black History Month. So it's one of the things that I really look forward to, especially on a Friday, which is considered our game day. We'll sit there and watch a video. But on this special Friday, we actually watched about Medgar Evers, and we learned about his history. And then that sort of woke me up to the political realm of things, because all you understood was Malcolm X and Dr. King. But when you really got to understand who Medgar Evers was, and some of the late greats of Huey P. Newton, Ralph Abernathy, and the rest of them, the great minds behind the civil justice movement that sort of engaged me to want to go and vote more. So then when I got to college, Danny was one of the first ones I met on the campaign trail when he was with the Sanders campaign. So I got to engage with them and engage with different other organizations, and really ultimately was able to shed a light of what the importance of voting really means to a HBCU campus, and then understanding what's going on in our world can change by simply casting that ballot to vote.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Anyone else wants to share their first voting experience and who pretty much dictated them to have a civic engagement in their community?
I know here. Oh, go ahead.
I would say that my mother, of course, would be the reason. I was actually at my middle school, which was a precinct, and I was kind of upset I couldn't go to PE that day. And I actually saw my mom on her lunch break actually go in and vote, and it kind of resonated with me a little different, especially as a young kid who was like more eager for PE than anything. But I didn't turn 18. Well, growing up in Palm Beach, which was really the Chad capital of that whole 2000 election, seeing how that happened and understanding, how it really happened in our backyard. It's like, what's the whole voting process? And being a journalist in high school, it really kind of, having to report on it and really having to learn about it more. It's like, it really intrigued me. And then in 2004, which was the first presidential election I could vote in, I voted for John Kerry. He lost, and then I kind of realized that, it's kind of like gambling. It's like you vote, but you can't really put all your emotions into the process because your candidate could lose if the majority doesn't really think the same way or vote the same way you do. And then even from 2000, understanding what the whole electoral college process was. And it makes sense to some extent, but at the same time, even when we look at the 2000 election or you look at the 2016 election, if the rules are the game of winning the electoral college, that has to be a strategy. But in everything, what really engaged me in the power of voting is seeing it, and not to belabor it too much, but even working in the political process, I see it a lot more because what people don't see on a day-to-day basis is elected officials who are briefed on laws and briefed on policies and briefed on resources and have to go from committee to committee to vote on these issues that could impact the quality of life for people throughout this city, throughout this state, or whatever it may be. And understanding the power of that while people are going to work, whether they're working overnight, driving, school teachers, whatever, it doesn't really matter. While they're doing their day-to-day job, somebody's actually focused on the fact of voting for the issues that matter most to them. So it kind of makes it resonate to a point of, even though you don't care, somebody cares enough to cast a ballot or cast a vote in committee about the issues that matter to you. So it should matter enough for you to get up out the bed and go vote, because that's the least of the process that you have to do compared to the elected officials of, even though we want to complain about the work that they do, it's the fact of they're actually voting for you. All you have to do is make the first step, which is actually casting your ballot to vote.
Awesome. Mr. Johnson, did you want to chime in on who influenced you to go out to vote? Well, to actually vote?
And good stuff, Phil. A lot of us on this panel have had a great deal of work with each other and the work that we do in the community. Here in Jacksonville, I think we're blessed to have such an amazing amount of people who've been involved in so many different ways. But mine was of no relation to me, Earl Johnson Sr. Some of you may remember him, but Attorney Johnson was the first African-American to be elected president of the Jacksonville City Council. And he was a game changer for me. He was a friend of the family. And I saw Mr. Johnson as this larger than life character. And he coupled with, and I'm taking it back, so I'm a little bit older than some of the folk, but Dr. Danford, you should remember these folk, Earl Johnson Sr. and Hattie Green Dix. I saw these people, they were like these powerhouses that were, as people of color, making changes in the community. And so the understanding for me was that we didn't have a rite of passage. In other societies and other indigenous communities, there were rites of passage, like a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, that took us from being a child into adulthood. And as a journalist for the Times Union years ago, I wrote about it. Our rite of passage was voting. That was the opportunity for us to signal that we had moved from childhood into that space of adulthood. And so and I don't think people do this anymore, but I'm reminded there's a man, he's still living. I go see him as much as I can when I can. His name is Mr. Lloyd Pearson. Lloyd Pearson is the brother of Rutledge Pearson. And Rutledge was the president of the Jacksonville NAACP and leader at one point, and then leader of the NAACP Youth Council. Very involved. We're talking back in the 60s. And he lost his life, as his wife told me, and she did this, she said, in a car accident. He was out fighting for freedom and he did not make it back. There's for years been speculation about that. But his brother, Lloyd, although very passionate, was not as vocal as Mr. Rutledge was. So in order to continue to support his brother's legacy, Mr. Lloyd Pearson would go around to high schools in Duval County, and he would silently go to the lunchroom and register young people to vote. Just walk around. He's now 90, I want to say 98, 99, but he would just go out, register to vote. So in 1993, because you could register 6 months before your 18th birthday, in the lunchroom at Ribault Senior High School is where I registered to vote. I didn't know that a few years later, I would become the youngest elected official in the state of Florida, or go on to serve Governor Lawton Childs, or do some other wonderful things. But it was because of the people that I saw in that foundation. And it was because of Mr. Pearson, who was silent yet powerful. And we need to do more of that. Mr. Pearson didn't come telling me who to vote for and how it should be done and what should be done. But I remember, and then I could see Denise Lee, and I could remember Mrs. Singleton and Sally Mathis and these other wonderful women and men. And so it became incumbent upon me. And I think someone said earlier about the young man, brother, what you said about your grandfather. I remember my grandmother saying, if you aren't part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I had started on my career. I was working at News Channel 4, was it WJXT? And I was working toward my career, and it was just an itch in me. And I'm like, I see all these problems, and I'm talking about the problems and reporting on the problems, but it became incumbent upon me to be a part of the solution. So although I didn't spend the rest of my life being elected, doing that at that point in life not only helped me and showed that I could be a part of the process, but I believe in some way inspired some other younger people to say, we don't have to have all of this lifetime of experience, but what we must have is the passion to see the change happen.
That is 100% correct. 100%. Mr. Dwight, do you have, did you want to chime in on this as well?
I guess I can.
You're the youngest.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, that's weird. I am the youngest. I think the first time I voted was what is it? It was in Obama's election, and I think one of the main things that was big for me was it felt out of this world, and it felt like an obligation. I don't remember the exact moment, but I knew that once that it was time for me to register, that was one of the first things I did when I turned 18. And I did it because I just wanted to see, I wanted to see a Black man in the White House. That was my whole motivation behind voting for that first time. And honestly, I had already knew how important voting was because since I was in middle school, I worked under 3 different mayors and whatnot in Jacksonville. And so I think that I already knew how important it was, but when I knew that President Obama was when it was his turn, I was like, whoa, you know? And honestly, I was like, yeah, if we could do longer, let's do longer and whatnot. So that was my motivation. Seeing him get in that first time, I said, yeah, this is what is my motivation. So that's my story.
Awesome. So we all have shared who influenced us. Now, outside of the home, we have most of you gentlemen having a public figure as an influence. Now, in the home, I remember my family having conversations about who they're voting for or why they're voting for that. Do any of you gentlemen actually remember this having some kind of family discussion when it comes to voting?
Not really for me. It was more of a fact of knowing that everybody was voting Democrat. I think that was more the issue. I think it was more discussion around who's going to be the Democratic presidential nominee in '92 or 2000, rather than anything else. But that's all it kind of it was in my household, at least.
Okay.
In my household, it was pretty much just automatic. My parents were Democrats. You're blindly going to vote for everyone that's that's on a Democratic ticket. Without having conversation, and this is something that I've learned and I try to do more of, just really researching and understanding who you're voting for, what their policies are, what their background is. Even in the video, a gentleman spoke on state and local elections, which directly impacts you, us, me, as just as much as these national elections do. And really taking the time to understand the candidates and what their policies are and their beliefs are. So we did not have those conversations back then, because it was just, again, an automatic, we're going to check this box. So that's something that I've learned and I'm trying to instill in my children, my families, just more research, more conversation, really digging and finding out who these individuals are, and then taking the step from there.
Well, as far as my household is concerned, again, going back to my grandfather, we were kind of immersed in it growing up. We had no choice, and almost like Andrew, we were, blindly voting for whomever our elders were kind of, telling us to vote for. And although my grandfather was never elected, he held a place in the community where folks came to him for advice. They came to him to see, Smokey, who are we voting for mayor? He hosted these fish fries every night, and as I got older, I viewed them more so as gathering spaces to have those conversations about politics, about who they should vote for, how they should vote. So it was always infused in our household, all the way from an early age, and until this day, we still meet at 2292 Mott Street around election time to pass out yard signs, to just talk about who is the best person for the community.
And I think those conversations are like pivotal to the growth of our community. One thing that I talk about on my podcast is civic engagement. In order for us to grow as a community, we have to be educated on what's going on, what's on the ballot. And so that was one of the things that we talked about in our household, and conversations with my dad. Even earlier today, me and him had a conversation about what's on the ballot, what type of bond referendum is on the ballot, who's on the city council, how are they voting when it comes to the education that will impact me and my siblings, but as well as the education that my parents will be receiving from their children. Because of course we don't go back in the day and tell them, hey, this is what we taught today. We didn't just learn 1 + 1, but we learned, the power of our voice through doing this, while also learning in discrete math, x squared plus b squared equals c squared, or whatever the cause may be. And so then later on growing up, now it's like my family comes to me because now I'm more civically engaged and I'm more educated on what's going on the ballot, to the point where my friends, when it's around this time, they say, hey, where can I look at my voter registration information at? What should I do? Should I vote blue, blue, blue? And I'm like, hey, don't vote blue, blue, blue. Don't vote red, red, red. Vote for what you stand for. What are your morals? So then when you go look at the ballot, okay, candidate A, they're against abortion. Candidate B is for abortion, or candidate A is against civic engagement or criminal justice reform, but candidate B is for criminal reform. Knowing those things allows for a robust conversation, especially amongst the family, but it also allows for a engagement within the family, because now you're reaching one, teaching one, and then they're gonna pass it on to their coworkers, they're gonna pass it on to their classmates, then hopefully they'll do the same thing in their household, and then it's just a domino effect.
In some ways, I believe too, it's, I heard a quote once and it said, Black love in any form is a form of protest. And and I thought that was so powerful. And I think that's one of the ways that we, especially as Black men, but as Black people, can show love, is to exercise our vote. I watched a special last night on CNN, a portion of it, First Ladies. And one of the things that was probably that stuck with me most was about Michelle Obama's conversation with kind of not wanting her husband to run for any office. And the reason she said that is because, think about it, every other Black leader that had run for office had been killed. And she was thinking in terms of the man she loved and the father of her children and somebody who she knew had a good heart. And so even though she had not become she had been very successful as a lawyer, she had not become a part of the political process, but she had to release that. And I think in many ways in our families, in our communities, she said, there was no choice for me but to get involved, because this was a form of protest that I had to take this stand. And so many times I hear people all the time in communities and saying, well, I don't want to talk to my children about that yet, or I don't want to have this conversation yet. And my thing is just the opposite. I think when we ingrain it into them and make it as natural as drinking water, that they should be civic minded and responsible and responsive and a part of the community. Not only does it empower them in a form of protest that empowers the community to do better and be greater, but it also limits the interaction they will have with things that make them less than. So for me in my household, I mean, I remember those conversations, listening to my grandmother have the conversation with Miss Hattie Green, or wanting to know who was running next and wanting to be a part of things. I see Mrs. Finley sitting there in the Urban League, and back then she was the VP of the Urban League. They almost had to chase me out of the Urban League because I would go there all the time to soak up as much knowledge as I could. And even though I didn't know why, the things that I'm doing now, it lets me know that it's because of the foundation that was poured into me then. So we too, as gentlemen, as brothers, we have a responsibility, which I believe, especially those that are on this call, but we have a responsibility to talk to everyone that we come in contact with. If we don't have any children, to the children in our family, to our nieces and nephews and cousins, to say, here is this thing. And even though they might not understand now, that foundation that we lay will be what propels them in the future.
And for me, my mother never had in-depth conversations with me as a child about the voter educational process and what does it mean. But as I got older and experienced life and the things are happening, because I was also raised vote blue, 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 no matter what, then I realized you have to make the educated choice for yourself what's close to you. Scripture says, train a child the way it goes, and when they're old, they will not depart. It's valuable and important that we teach children as they have understanding and can engage and dissect everything that we are telling them about the voting process. Early as maybe 7, 8 years old. So as they get older, when they start making educated choices, which is also the voting process, they'll make sound decisions, not by what people sway them to do, but what's right for them. Because it's never the right or wrong choice. It's always the choice that's best for you.
If I can chime in, I love that, Chauncey. And, I think we're all saying this, is that we not only have the responsibility to vote, but to research, to really understand who's on the ballot, understand what your morals are and how that connects with the person there. I'm still, there isn't the best way. I don't know what the best way is to research and maybe Jalen, you can chime in on this, the best way to find out about bond referendums, the best way to find out about the candidates that are the candidates that are, you know, that are running. You know, fortunate for me in Charlotte, I'm connected in a way that I know the individuals, and I know someone that knows someone. So I'm in the spaces, I'm in the places where they're speaking and different things like that. I'm in those circles, so I get that understanding. But for someone that's separated, that's distant from that space, how does that person really research and understand where to go to find this information, other than doing a Google search and trying to find someone's information?
So we all heard of the whole saying, if there's not a seat at the table, bring your own seat to the table. You're already there at the table. What you have to do, and Danny and I'm sure Philip, y'all have the same questions being called to the office all the time. People will ask a representative or an elected official, what is your stance on taxes? What is your stance on education? What is your stance on this? When you are presented that opportunity, go ahead and ask those questions. Hey, what is your stance on this? How do you feel about this? So then you're able to educate yourself on, okay, this is where they stand. As far as bonds and stuff, that's just simply going in, and when they announce, city council may vote or county commissioners may vote, say, hey, we have voted on this bond worth this amount of money to do a park in the community for the kids or whatnot. Go in and they will, all this is public records for those in the minutes of the meetings. And you can find out what is the nature of this bond. Does it mean that we don't have a tax increase for us as residents? Does this mean that I'm gonna have to pay more, or does this mean that my wages are gonna be cut a little bit different? How they don't make this penny, because even though they are saying, yes, they don't do a bond, on the back end, as a resident, you have some revenue that is going towards that bond. So educating yourself on that is simple. If you are a Democrat, you can go to your Democrat party. As African Americans, we have a Black political caucus in almost every city, every municipality, where they will endorse who they believe. But one thing I want to leave you with is you don't have to, and I'm gonna say this as honest and true that I know, truthful that I can. You don't have to vote party affiliate. Me personally, I look for statesmen and stateswomen, people that have statesman for me. Representative John Lewis was a statesman for me as well. The work that they did was based off of what the community needed across the country as well. So that's how I look to see, okay, are you voting to make a change and an impact within our community that can help us grow as individuals and as a community? Or are you making your votes based off of what PAC is backing you up in your campaign as well?
If I could piggyback on some powerful stuff Jalen said, I would say until I started working in politics and looking at people from a different aspect, like removing Republican, Democrat, it's like we get stuck on Democrat because that's what we feel is right. But there are a lot of good Republicans out there who will do great stuff. The issue is we get caught up in the barbershop conversations or the national narrative or whatever Donald Trump's doing. And we just want to, you know what, they're racist or this, and we want to put them in that box. And anybody who's Black who may be open to the fact of, you know what, I'll consider it or whatever, they always get chastised. But then the other thing we don't really look at, and I get a different perspective just politically looking at the numbers, is half the Blacks, Jacksonville, throughout the state, throughout the country, really, they're not even registered Democrats anymore. They're registered independent. So it's more of a fact of you have a Democratic Party that's not really speaking all the issues you want to hear. You have a Republican Party that's not really saying anything you want to hear either. But then you're really tossing up that you don't want to choose a party, but then you want to get mad about, you know, what you really don't choose. So at the end of the day, you have to make a choice. But at the same time, it's understanding that everything that we've been taught isn't actually, not to say right and wrong, but it's the fact that you have to be open to different narratives and remove the emotion from it. Because honestly, there are good Republicans out there. There are good Trump supporters out there. It's just the fact of, I think that we get so caught up in our personal emotions and feelings out there that we put them in a box and label them a racist or label them something else. And it's like, you know what? That's just a political view. I can still go fishing, play basketball, go golfing with this guy or lady, and it's still a good thing. We just need to get past the emotional narrative of it.
And I will have to agree with what you just said. My background, just like Yondrix, I'm Haitian, and both of my parents were raised in the church. My dad was Baptist, my mom was Pentecostal. My dad was Republican, my mom was Democrat. But in the household, we saw them have discussions on why they're choosing this individual to vote for and why the other is choosing this party to vote for. So it kind of made us as individuals, like my sister, she's one party, I can be one party, but we start to now view who we vote for with what their beliefs are. You know, not to say Trump's name, but my mom doesn't believe in abortion. So she may like one aspect of Trump, but then again, she may like another aspect of Biden, to where it makes you think and makes you want to research, you know, who I am really voting for. So I do like that, you know, we need to have more discussions in the household when it comes to different parties and, you know, local elections and how that really affects us, you know, as a young child growing up.
Absolutely.
And I did want to touch on this for quite just a small little while. I do remember in high school we had social studies. You know, there's student body. When we're young, we don't realize how important these groups are, and we seem to sometimes shun these groups of individuals that actually join these parties. Do you think this is a class that we should have, or a group, or everybody should be taking in high school, to where they're able to actually go into more detailed learning of different parties?
Well, it used to be offered. The class was called civics. You just like there are no civics classes that are offered. So absolutely, but civics starts. I guess it's somewhat biblical. What do they say? Charity begins at home and spreads abroad. Civics starts at home. I grew up knowing what state was where, the capitals of states. Even all of us, those of us who grew up, and I'm telling my age a little bit now, but those of us who remember, was it Schoolhouse Rock? When they taught you how a bill goes down the aisle to get passed and how budgets are created. A lot of those things are gone by the wayside. And so I believe, yeah, we do need civics in schools, but it starts with us teaching our kids. And, you know, we said it earlier. I am going to quote former Congresswoman Corrine Brown, and someone said, you're not at the table, bring a chair. But if you don't even know the room where the meeting is being held, you could bring a chair. You can't go anywhere. I remember Corrine once said, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I thought that was one of the most poignant things that could ever have been said, because a lot of times we're trying to get to where the table is and we don't know where it's located. We don't know the people, the players. So we've got to be at a place. And that's why I'm not downplaying third-party candidates. The third party, when I ran for office, ran as a Democrat. And have been involved as a consultant. So I will put that out there as a disclaimer. Now more in journalism and strategic communications than anything else. But I will tell you that if we are not participating in both parties, in the system, at a place where we can make the decisions, then the decisions will be made without us. But when we get so upset and offended, and as Phil said, emotional, and decide, oh, well, I'm gonna sit over here and vote independent because my vote counts and all that, in many ways, our vote then is completely diluted, and our power that we could be using to make changes isn't there. So we need to start getting our kids involved from home and urging our school boards and school systems and legislatures to ensure that civics is taught in schools.
Our future depends on what we teach our kids now. So what Mr. Johnson said is very correct. I took American government at Raines High School. So I had a very vast information thrown at me about the government process and the three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. And I knew then as a ninth grader, wow, this is more than I've been known my whole entire life. It should be off in high school, because the pressure of telling kids what to think without information is setting them up to go to college without knowing anything. And that's what we don't need for people who will grow up and make decisions. One of the most amazing things is this is the first presidential election where the 2000, 2001, and somewhat to a limit of the 2002 babies are actually voting in a presidential election. How have they been prepared for this moment is the question we need to ask. Have they been taught, or will they be going in blindly? If anyone goes in blindly, they don't know exactly what they're voting for. They just, as they say, hearing barbershop talk. That's why not only civics need to bring back to school, American government need to be going back to school, but we need to have dialogue and community discussions with young people so we can train them at the end of the day. Make a voice for yourself and vote on that. Don't worry about what this person said. Oh, don't do that. Don't do this. Make a conscious effort and make a voice and vote for yourself, what you believe what is right.
Just to echo the sentiments of the two gentlemen, I totally agree. We need to bring civics and American government back in school. I mean, I'm not as aged as my good brothers, but I do remember having American government, going through those law classes and learning those basic civics. But I also think we should reimagine, how we're approaching this as well. I think our churches, our fraternities need to start looking at, possibly getting C4 designations so they can actually play in the politics process without putting their 501c3s on the back burners. I think our organizations that are dealing with our kids on a day-to-day basis need to have a component of what political education looks like for that wing. So it's not just the schools, it goes back, as Pastor Johnson, I'm just going to go ahead and deem him that, as Pastor Johnson said, charity begins at home and spreads abroad. I mean, and as we talk about building these communities and building this village of people, we all have to be invested in making sure our kids and our future generations have the political education they need to go out and compete in this global, world we're living in at this point.
I will take it a step further and say this. Everything that we just said goes back to why it's important for us to, as men, to vote. Because that's city council, that is your local municipalities. The late great Huey P. Newton said, the revolution has always been in the hands of the young always inherit the revolution. This is a revolution that we're in the midst of right now. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We're in the midst of a racial tension war. We're in the midst of change that can occur, but the ones that can lead that change are the ones that are in elementary school, middle school, millennials like myself. The millennials in the 2016 election, 83 million millennials were in this world during that time. 52% of them actually voted during that election cycle. That is a number that many people need to take heed of, is because we need to increase that number in order for us to see this civic engagement, this civics in high school, elementary school, to be brought back to the table. When we're able to be able to make a lot of change within our community and bring forth a lot of great more leadership as well.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that one thing we also have to change the narrative to is understanding that we have to make a plan for what happens after we vote. I think that also ends up becoming a problem, like we want to vote. And, as a political strategist, I look at it different. It's almost like if you think about Steph Curry or LeBron shooting 3 for 10, you get 3 shots out of 10, you miss 7. That's basically what voter registration ends up being. You get 3 people out of the 10 that you register who actually turn out to vote. And the issue with that is we end up having those 7 people sit on the sidelines or sit on the bench for the next 2 years, 4 years, and we go get more people to register than we don't even activate the people that we already have registered to vote. That always ends up becoming the problem. But I will say this, I took civics in high school, but I remember playing spades mainly through high school. I mean, in civics specifically, and I hate to sell out the teacher or the class, but I know at least 10 people who will vouch for that. But I do remember holding on to some of the stuff I end up working in today, which is federal, state, and local government policy. But I think not only having a chair at the table ends up being it, but understanding we have to play the game and play by the rules. Like, it's just like playing spades, Madden, 2K, or chess. I always tell folks, you have to understand or play by the rules. So when people end up saying, oh, we need a 3-party system, we need a new party, it's like, listen, this was established 200 or 300 years ago. If this is a 2-party system we have to work in, let's work within it. Let's make it work for what we have to make it do. But understand that if you're making demands that aren't going to happen, like playing football with a baseball bat, then it's just not going to work. So you have to be able to play by the rules and really have a strategic plan to understand what happens after we vote. So after we vote, it's like, how do we approach the policies that we want to see change? Because even though the candidates and everybody's going to talk about jobs and education, I mean, they're really going to be forced with issues or really touching issues regarding abortion or mental health funding. So there are other issues that we still have to be a part of that still impact our community. So we can't just go down the Black Lives Matter train of defund the police when we have 10 or 15 other issues that we're playing spades with. We got to come off the board with at least 7 books. So we let's play the game and get other policies that we can win with.
And to piggyback off of that, can we normalize strategizing within the Black community? I think that has been one that has not been at the forefront. When we look at Dr. King, you look at Rosa Parks, and you look at SNCC and the NAACP and the National Urban League, every move that they've done when it comes to civic engagement has been strategy. It's been, okay, we have to strategize first, whether it may be in the basement of the church eating some cold pizza or sandwiches, whatever that strategy may be, where you're planning out your next phase. Like Philip said, Black Lives Matter, yes, that's going to always be an issue until we have equality. But once we get our equality, what's next? Will it be having a livable wage? Will it be having affordable healthcare? Will it be having an education or a criminal justice reform? We have to strategize that as a community and not get lost in the narrative, oh, we're just going to vote blue, blue, blue because they don't take care of it down the road. No, we need to be proactive now and take care of it. So when you're voting, you're being proactive to change that narrative and to be strategic when we're trying to align and get all of these issues handled.
And real quick, I know me and Jalen going back and forth a little bit on the panel, but I think we need to change it from equality to equity.
Absolutely.
About the fact that we help build this country and we look at investment accounts or whatever, it's the equity that we need to get out of the country. So I think when we change that narrative and we change that definition, then it really changes the narrative on how we approach things strategically.
Hey, Philip, Jalen, I've been a part of these and have listened to, I think we all have been to plenty of panel discussions, and we come up with these ideas and we talk a lot about what we should do. How do we actually do it? I know we're going to have a call to action at the end of this call, but for me, I'm about action, and I know you all are as well. We're coming up with these great ideas. We need to have some follow-up discussions and put some plan to action.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you have to look at is, like Danny said, we need a lot more of these nonprofit organizations being more active, being more engaged in what's going on, because to be honest with you, they're the ones that are empowering our youth right now. Our YMCAs, our YWCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, our HBCUs, they're active right now.
100 Black men.
Yes, 100 Black men. They're all being active right now with these strategic initiatives. And now you're starting to see Fortune 500 companies now, because they realize that the value of a Black dollar, and I'm gonna let that sit in with some people. And now they wanted to give to our HBCUs. They wanted to be able to say, okay, hey, we have diversity and inclusion within our workforce. Okay, but what does that diversity and inclusion look like? Are you setting up an area where your employees can come and talk to you about, hey, how they would like to strategize within their community? One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is our financial institutions, they have revenue that is generated from the federal government that they can go and give back into our community. So when we say we need healthcare, they can be in those conversations as well. When we say we need a new education, they can be in that conversation as well. So we need to hold them accountable. We need to stop the silos, for one, because the silos are just going to keep dividing us. We need to learn how to come together as different entities, different organizations, and say, hey, these are our demands. And then we need to break out into our communities, go into the churches, go into the barbershops, the hair salons, wherever that may be, and educate everybody on those different demands and say, hey, let's work together. Let us come together and unite.
Mr. Urban, I do appreciate you saying that, sir. I am blessed to have the fortunate to be a fellow for the Campus Vote Project, me and also the SGA president at Edward Waters College, Mr. John Henry. And one of the things of our initiatives is voter education, informing people what the voting process look like, what you need to see on the ballot, what to look for, how to research, how to get this information. But something that you said, organizing, that is very important. And it plays a part of the political process. When you said that, I thought about the late Atlanta Mayor Manuel Jackson. When he was elected mayor of the city of Atlanta, he had a butts in with the banks about diversity by hiring blacks and banks to make it more diversified in Atlanta, to the point where he said, we will pull out our city money out of your banks and put it with someone else until you bring diversity. They turned around and started hiring blacks. And that was the turnaround how Atlanta got more progressively black over time. It was an elected leader that take a change because he believed in black people. As black men, we got to start believing each other more, come in these discussions more, so that we mobilize and organize together so that we can spread the word throughout our communities. That's what's missing the most, us spreading the word. A lot of small people talking, but they're not talking in masses. It's now time for us to talk in masses and educate and remind our brothers, your vote do matter. I'm voting. So when you vote, you actually voting for me too. And that's one of the things we need to echo more.
Another thing I think we should echo more. I mean, I know we want to increase turnout amongst Black men, but I think oftentimes it gets lost in the conversation. Like, Black men are the second most likely group to turn out to vote, only second to Black women. I mean, we're at least 30 points ahead of our Hispanic counterparts, and we're, killing, our white counterparts. So I think Black men should be applauded for the level of civic engagement, we already have as a group. I think that suppresses the vote to a certain extent when we talk about Black men not turning out and putting the party on Black men. If only we had a extra 20,000 more Black men, we could have did this. We're not in this, by ourselves. This is a broad-based coalition. I'm speaking just from the Democratic Party standpoint. That's my party affiliation. But just speaking from that broad-based coalition, we can't continue to put that weight, that responsibility on the backs of Black people. And so my biggest fear is as we move forward, to this next election, to the general election, that same conversation is going to come up. And then what it's going to do moving forward, it's going to tamper more and more Black sentiment. It's going to make folks not want to come out, and our work is going to be, even harder. So I think we should applaud our brothers too, because we are the second most likely group to turn out to vote.
Question. Since we're the second most likely group to come out to vote, this week I encountered about 3 Black males, and I was introducing them to this topic that we're having tonight. And the response I've gotten was really eye-opening. Some of them are saying it's not part of my religion. We don't really matter. Our votes don't really matter. It's just a lot of negativity towards them. And then, with the returning citizens, 1 of 4 Black men are not able to vote. And I honestly believe this has trickled down to the younger generation, to where they really don't think their voice matters because there is no representation in those areas.
Well, but we have to do a job. I mean, I have to push back a little bit, because as a journalist and as a researcher and as somebody who's about numbers, yeah, we are doing well as Black men as we vote. But I was just looking at some statistics from the Brookings Institute, where it says specifically that Black voter turnout as a whole, and specifically Black male voter turnout, has declined in 2012, 2016, and then again, in the 2018 elections, I just looked at it, our numbers as Black men have been going down. So it's important for us to, we must applaud the ones that are going out to vote, but we must also explain to those people and those organizations why the importance is there. During the election cycles and opportunities, I try to go out to churches. And I know a lot of people saying, well, that's not cool. Y'all only come on election day and you go and souls to the polls. I think it's important for us to deal with, I think someone mentioned earlier about the organizations, churches, fraternal and sorority organizations. And so we're talking about Black men here, so specifically fraternities, but we have to make that not just did you register, but are you empowered and you're literate? I literally had a conversation with an individual last week. Last week, I had a conversation with someone who told me that they had registered to vote on Facebook. Not that they clicked a button to go to the site to get the registration. The person told me that they registered to vote on Facebook. And I got to follow up that this person told me they would be voting on November 3rd. Guess where? Not at the polls, not getting an absentee ballot. This person told me that they would be voting on Facebook for the presidential elections. And so we have to do, and this just happened last week. So I say that it's incumbent upon us to, rather than these big institutional, it's got to be with organizations, right? It's got to be. I've been with the Urban League 20 plus years, and I've been involved with other organizations, but it's got to be one-on-one. I think Yandrick said it best. Like it's each one teach one. Like we got to go into our friends and people that we don't know. I like to work out. So at the gym, you see somebody, you ask them if you can. And here's the thing, this year, more than ever, we're going to have the physical contact. There are going to be statistics coming out shortly that talk about this huge surge, especially in my state and in other cases around the country, where COVID is resurging again. So it's even more incumbent now that we use the tools of technology, that we use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Christian Mingle, whatever you got, use it and talk to people, but ask the questions. Not only are you voting, but do you know what you're voting for? And you be empowered enough to share that information with other people as well. And by the way, I ain't nobody's pastor. I meant to tell him that earlier. I ain't nobody.
I can't tell, brother. Hey, you know what, Danny, you're both right. Danny, you're right as well. I can sense that if this doesn't work out well, the pressure on Black men, the fatigue after a while, that will cause an issue and keep people home next time around. I feel like it's just a chance that we're going to have to take, we're just going to have to cross that bridge when we get there. But at this point, it's just like, it's all hands on deck. I'm pretty sure if anyone is listening to this panel discussion, watching this panel discussion, I'm going to venture to say 95% of you all are already registered, ready to vote. So we're like somewhat preaching to the choir. I think this conversation that we're having is, as Raman mentioned, is we need this to be grassroots. We need you all to, if you're at the gym, as Raman mentioned, if you're at work, you're doing your job and getting 1, 2, 3, 10, 30, 40 people registered, and you're pulling in as many people as possible. So this is more about you all, us all, tapping into our networks and pulling in other people, and understanding how important it is for us to go beyond just handling ourselves, making sure we're registered, we're actually getting other people involved.
I do want to chime in. I am a woman, and I do not believe the Black man understands the power they have when it comes to the youth. Black men have a lot going on. They have a lot going against them. But I would personally love to see more Black men out there talking to the younger Black men and the Black women. Us women, we can do so much. But when a Black man is there and they see this man doing what he has to do, just like Mr. Johnson said, that was monumental to who he became in this world. With social media and society, everybody becomes busier and busier and busier. It comes to the point where I truly believe the younger Black men just do not connect with the older generation.
But I think, to be honest with you, the presence is there. It's just not publicized. One of the things, like Andrew said, 100 Black men, they're having these conversations. Now, can the conversations be publicized more? Yes. Would I would like to see a little bit more mentorship? Of course. But I think the conversation, like this conversation right now that we're having, I assure you there's several conversations going on across the world right now, especially during this time of an election cycle. But I do believe that, yes, they should be publicized a lot more. Do we get credit for some of these conversations? Absolutely not. But you don't need to be given credit for this type of conversation. These conversations should happen naturally. I mean, it goes back to your question that you asked earlier, that we have these household conversations. If we have more of those, then yes, you'll see more of these conversations being had across the world in playgrounds. I know for a fact in the barbershops, believe it or not, a lot of guys talk about politics in the barbershop. They talk about it in their group chats, playing basketball, whatever it may be, lifting weights. Yeah, these conversations are being made across the world. We just need, like I said, need to publicize them a little bit more.
As a 35-year-old, I grew up around older people. And that's who influenced my life. A lot of people my age say, you walk around like you got an old spirit out. Like, there's a reason for that. It's because of my upbringing. My generation, my bringing up, I grew up around people that was nearly almost 40 years older than me. So I got a wealth of wisdom from old school. Matter of fact, 35-year-old, my mother's 75, my dad was 85 when he passed, and I was 26 years old, and I had family members that was in their 60s. So I understand the power. And I'm blessed because I have an old mindset, but I'm in a young body that can also relate to a younger generation. So I know as me as an individual, God has ordained me for a purpose like this. And I hate this, I not try to say it like that, but that's the reality of the situation. So what I do with an old mindset and with a young body that can relate, I try to partake wisdom at this point in my life to let a younger generation know the notion that your vote don't matter. It doesn't matter. They try to feed you that to stop you from voting. They always try tricks, and they've been trying these tricks ever since Black people have been fighting for the right to vote. And it's continuing to happen today. Now they can't stop you, or they try to stop you at ballots. Now they try to get your mindset by telling you these things. And that's something that we have to nip in the bud very quickly. And that's one of the things I'm passionate about stopping. I say I voted in every election, and I never felt like my vote didn't count. I knew it counted. I continued to vote. Even when it didn't work my direction, I said, going to vote again. And we have to give people the energy to say, even though it might not work for you, because voting is a risk, because we don't know how the turnout's going to go. But you have to take a leap of faith, even if it don't work out for you right now in a way that you thought should happen. It should never stop you from voting, because there are other times and other opportunities on so many levels to vote. And that's one of the messages that I am so passionate to continue to convey to. There is no more breath in my body.
I love that, Chauncey.
I also think we got to figure out a way to repackage it. You talk about the disparities between the older folks and the younger folks and the misconnections and how we're not getting together. Well, the first piece is we have to get it together, because we can't move forward together as a community without having the wisdom of the elders and the energy of the youth. So the first thing, we have to get it together, but we also have to figure out, like, how are we giving them the information? I don't mind going to board meetings. I'm sure most folks on this panel don't have a problem going to board meetings, sitting in 2-hour committee meetings, going back home and talking and debriefing and all that stuff. That's kind of a part of our weird little lives that we live in this political space. But taking that information to Darius at the corner store, he's gonna look at you like you're crazy, even though Darius should digest this information. He should, it's great stuff. So we got to figure out a way to meet the people we're trying to turn out where they are and give them the information in an easily digestible way that they not only can, internalize it, but also feel comfortable enough with the information to go out and talk about it, to get on their Facebook and, and talk about planning and zoning in a way that gets their following or their network, fired up, or talk about Joe Biden or whomever they're voting in a way that gets their network fired up. So we got to figure out a way how we're packaging that message and getting it back. And so, yeah, that's my piece.
That's perfect, because I recall when I first started voting, you get to the booth and I keep going back to this bond referendum thing, but just you go back and you're like, I didn't even know this was on there. What is this about? Let me just do this right here and click yes. I don't know, and you just have no idea. And I was educated, but I just I did not know that that was going to even be on the ballot to begin with, that we were going to have that conversation, that's being discussed. That's an issue that's happening right now in the city that I'm living in. So how does someone that was in that stage like myself years ago, how does that person, how do we bring that to that person to say, hey, this is, by the way, this is going to be discussed. You want to know about this? So as you said, informing, packaging that, giving that to that person and saying, hey, you want to be knowledgeable on this. You're going to vote on this. This is going to come up. You want to know what this means in its entirety.
And that alone is the difference between a stateswoman, statesman, and an elected official. Because a statesman and stateswoman, they don't know in the back of their brain when it comes down to anything that's on a ballot or anything, how am I going to deliver this to my community? How am I going to allow them to say, okay, and understand and grasp the concept that we're trying to push out and educate our community? Versus an elected official, they're just going to say, yeah, we voted on this tonight and it's out here on the ballot. Go vote for it. There has to become an accountability measure. Not only are we trying to figure out how we package it, but on the back side of things, we also got to be able to say, okay, as a community, how are we going to hold them accountable? Because we elected you into this office and everybody says, we voted you in, we can vote you out. Yeah, but in the meantime, during that term that they're serving, how are we holding them accountable to let us know what this truly means? You're representing us.
And that is 100% true. Representation is something that is really important. I do want to see what we can do as a group to reach out to more younger Black men. We do know a lot of homes are single family homes, mothers that, they don't have much influence when, especially if raising a young black boy. These kids usually follow the crowd. You can, whatever you say goes in one ear out the other. And I think being able to connect with them, on a different level, once a month we can, have a day where the kids could come out and we have, like little time, like a game time or, a day at the park, things like that, to where we can show them that, hey, we do care for you, and you're not just someone in the back line, and we can actually make things work. We can have finance classes, like my son, he loves football, and for some reason the younger generation feels their aim to fame is football. But then when he asked me, what is investing, he's asking me that question, but he may not have that example with the man in the home to teach them that kind of stuff. So in my mind, in the perfect world, I would like to see more community engagement with the younger generation, with males. When it comes to ladies, we're gonna always connect. Barbershop, we go to the hair store. We have more access to find each other compared to the male counterpart. If you're not in church, you most likely won't even find that if you don't go to church, or if you're not in a football team to where they have some kind of male interaction. So I would like to end this Zoom with a plan of action of what we can do. Either if it's not in Jacksonville, it can be something to where we can come together, in our prospective cities, to have more engagement with that community.
I think first and foremost, it is an internal process. So what I would say for the call to action is to take care of the home first. Take care of your family first. Have those conversations with the gentleman in your family, whether it may be at a family reunion, like Danny said, he has the fish fry, whatever it may be. Have those hard conversations about politics. Have those hard conversations about how we as Black men can be more engaged with our political system, with our voting process within our communities, how we can be more civically engaged, and then go from there. Look at your community. Look at where your neighborhood is. Look and see if there's a Title I or a Title III, 5, and Title IX school within your community. Look and see how you can get engaged with that as well. Then go and look at the churches in your community as well. See what they're doing. See, knock on their door and say, hey, how can I help you engage your congregation? Then continue to go, because like I said earlier, it's a domino effect. Once you go to someone else and they're able to take what you taught them, then they're able to go and spread that word, and more people will be engaged as well.
And just to add to that, I mean, I think, you, regardless of how you enter the situation, and this is where a lot of people kind of, I guess, missed a step. You got to make sure your intentions are pure, because these kids, this younger generation, they can pick up on it, like nothing, so you got to make sure your intentions are pure. You got to make sure, you have their best interests at heart, and they have to feel that they can trust you. I oftentimes, give the analogy between the politician and the drug dealer. The neighborhood and the kids, they look up to the drug dealer because they see he or she providing. They see he or she coming through for the community. They see, they provide security. The politician essentially does that same thing, but the key factor that's missing is trust. They don't trust the politician, but they will trust that drug dealer. So if we work on building trust and making sure our things are pure, we can get this younger generation to move however we need to be without changing ourselves or doing anything, outside of who we are intrinsically as men. So trust.
Yeah, that drug dealer is in the community. They're being seen. You can touch and feel them. That politician, not so much, which is why you've got a generation of the notion that my vote doesn't count, that no matter what, I don't trust this politician. All of that has grown for decades on, and it's because you're focused on this politician, this individual that you don't have touch and feel of. You don't see, you only see them during election once or twice or what have you, but they're not there and you don't know them personally. So the trust factor is big. What Jalen mentioned, starting from the home is absolute essential. And then the domino effect, moving out into your respective organizations, whether you're an AKA, whether you're an alpha, whether you're with the whether you're with the National Urban League, whether you're with the 100 Black Men of Jacksonville, whatever that is, you're holding them accountable. And you're pushing them, and you're getting them to be more involved, and to be and to be that individual, to be that group that we're looking for on this call.
I guess the call to action would be, I'm a little spoiled, I guess, living in Jacksonville, Florida, because the elected officials that we've had in our community, me being one of them, but not anymore, I'm more on the storytelling side now. But these are people I see in the community. We're going to the trap house, and I see these brothers. I'm not in that life anymore, but they're going to the trap. They're going, and sisters, they're going to the community centers, to the crab boil, to the cookout. And so they are a part of the community. I think rather than saying, well, and for me, the term I use is elected official as opposed to politician. And that's just for me because I see this as those people who get involved in public service is just that. Service is temporary. They go to do the service and then move forward. I think we as a community need to, as someone said earlier, hold them accountable, hold their feet to the fire to ensure that when they are doing whatever the thing is that they're doing, that they are understanding this is representative government and they should be responsive to the needs of the district, wherever that, or the constituents, as wherever that place is. So I think it's up to us, rather than coming at them adversarially, because many of them we do see in the community, and many of them, they do still hold that place of reverence, because they are the best of us that are representing us. So I'm okay with that. But we also must hold their feet to the fire. As a call to action, I think we must individually, as was said earlier, all my brothers said on here earlier, we must hold their feet to the fire, but we also have to do our part by individually making the connection. A lot of times we spend time on social media. I know I have a pretty healthy social media following, and my podcast is doing really well. And so what I try to do is use those educational opportunities and the times that I'm in front of classes teaching to ensure that I take the moments when they're available and have the discussions as they are necessary, right? And so we have to do that. And I challenge all of us to at least, especially now in the times of this election, at least once a day, go on to social media, put in a question that may solicit conversation. I'm not telling you have to tell people who to vote for or what specifically to do, but put a question in your social media, regardless of which one you use most or which ones you have. But that is a call to action that we can all take a part of. Put a question into our social interaction that we can allow, and then respond. And then the second part of that is picking up the phone and having those conversations. I wouldn't have found out about that individual that thought they had registered on Facebook and that had planned to vote on Facebook unless I had the conversation to ask them, not accusingly, not saying, you should know this as an adult in America, but I simply wanted to know, tell me about you. And that got me to that place. So instead of having those places where we're condemning or we're saying that, let's do more of that and commit to ourselves that we're going to pick up our phones, we're going to go to our computers, and at least once a day, talk to somebody we hadn't talked to before and just ask the question so that we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for sharing that sentiment, because I was about to get ready to say, hold their feet to the fire. One thing about elected officials, they have the privilege to serve as servants. They serve to the pleasure of us to represent us at the table. The tables that we don't have opportunity to get to, but they can. So once we hold their feet to the fire, we're reminding them, as you said, Mr. Johnson, they are representing us. And that's the most powerful and also the most heaviest burden that any individual can hold. But when you do it right, guess what you do? You connect community also, so that you won't be by yourself. But in order to do that, as everyone echoed, you must be involved in the community. Because when I feel like you are not involved in the community, then my vote won't go to your next election, because I didn't see you. That means I can't trust you. One of the other things that was discussed tonight. But most of all, love has to be a part of the process. Because we remember, love is an action word. And when I see it and sense it, then I can learn to trust you. Because I know that you love me so much that you'll look out for my best interest and never for yourself.
I have I guess a call to action or final thought. Or I really do enjoy the conversation, but my perspective is a little different, of course, working in politics and working campaigns. And I kind of look at it as, the father that wasn't involved in the child's life can't really speak on what that child is or who that child is. And I say that from an aspect of, most people will say the politician doesn't show up, they don't come around. Well, what if a politician told you, well, how many committee meetings have you showed up to? How many local government functions have you came to and spoke at and actually been involved in the process? And it becomes more of an excuse on why you shouldn't vote, instead of really understanding the fact that you're going to have something to complain about. So if voting is your one signature that you can have to voice your opinion, to share the fact of your frustrations in the world, in your city, in America, whatever, then vote. Don't make the excuses on why you shouldn't vote. The fact of, oh, the politician's not around. Well, would you want a politician who's, and I'll put it this way, and I hate to go this route, but I just have to. When everybody was stuck at home working with their significant others during COVID, I know everybody hit a point where you were like, hey, you're ready for them to go back to work, right? You hit that boiling point, right? Well, would you want a politician who's in your face every day, not working for you, or someone who's going to Tallahassee or downtown to City Hall or going to DC to fight for you every day? And understanding that they have to fight for you, you're not going to be able to see them, but you have to be able to stay abreast and understand what's going on and be that father that's going to be in that child's life, or be involved in the political process to educate yourself and edify yourself in the process in order to actually make that change. So I think the biggest thing, my step away, my walk away, is stop making excuses on why you're not voting. You're going to have something to complain about, so vote. Get that piece out the way, then you have the right to complain. But if you don't vote, then just shut up until the next election. My 2 cents at least.
Awesome. This was a really good discussion. And I think everybody brought viewpoints that I believe we should be able to move forward and have some type of action. Mr. Singleton, you did say something that kind of, struck me. How many, meetings have the community gone to? Most people can't even ever say they've been to one in their lifetime. And that's something that we do need to change as a whole. We do forget that the more faces that, when policies are being made that are of color, they will think about us. Okay, how is this affecting them? But when we don't show up at all, we're not the first thing on their mind. We're usually the last, honestly. So before we do end this, that is something we should all try to do, is, make sure that we are present at these hearings when policies are being made or being changed for your city. Is there anyone that would like to chime in a question that they may have had before we do have this come to a stop?
It looks like the chat feature is disabled. I could be wrong.
Let me check. It should be on there.
And I know there were some questions that looked like they had come across via Facebook.
I was just on the Facebook. I didn't see any questions. Dwight, did you see anything on there from your end?
I saw someone ask Phil something, but he answered it for them.
Okay, that's what I saw as well. Okay. So any closing statements, any questions?
Well, first of all, I want to remind everybody, and I may jump in again, but I got to say this is obviously, today was the last day to register to vote in the state of Florida. So even though I know the supervisor of elections office stayed open a little bit later now, but the law says that if you have not, if you get your voter registration postmarked by today, everything should be fine. We don't know whether it will reject or not, but I say it's better to be safe than sorry. And for those of you that have not checked, I know I marched with Dr. Danford in the Urban League and that team. And while I was at the supervisor of elections office, it took me 30 seconds to go in and say, hey, I want to make sure I'm good. I knew I was good, but I asked the question. It doesn't hurt, especially if you're voting by mail or absentee. Again, all the statistics that are coming across that I see are that things, when it comes to the coronavirus and illness, could be bad around that time. So if you can get your ballot, even if you have to go in and quickly hand deliver it back, let's do our part now to follow up and follow procedure, and go back to the website, to the supervisor of elections office, and make sure your ballot was counted.
And that is correct. I do know, as we were on this phone, the online platform for Florida to go vote was down. They are trying to bring it back up, but as of now, it is not working for anyone that is wanting to vote through the portal for the state of Florida.
You mean to register?
To register, yes, sir.
So because of that, and this is what we're urging people to do, because see, each of the county, in the 67 counties in Florida, each of the supervisor of elections have the ability to look at the registrations that come in and decide whether they made it or not. My recommendation, and if you need some of us to come and bring you some stamps, whoever it is that needs it, leave it on your doorstep. My recommendation would be to print off, if you can, the PDF that's there, because that PDF is still up. You can go, for those in Jacksonville, DuvalElections.com, or in other places, elect.us or elections.us. But you can go to those sites and download a voter registration form. And as long as it's postmarked, I wouldn't, at this point, since the office is closed, I wouldn't take it to the supervisor of elections office. But if you can get it to the post office before they close and get it postmarked, at least try. I mean, we shouldn't have waited this late, but that's not cool. I'm not condemning you. Let's make sure that we are doing the parts to make this thing work.
That is 100% correct. Okay, I want to thank every single person that took the time out of their busy schedule to be here. I believe we made way. We were live on Facebook, and we have a few people that shared. So do not feel that your time here was, well, I can't say that either, but your time here was appreciated. And I will do my job in Jacksonville and Clay County to put some functions together to where we can educate more individuals. I know the ballot is another struggle as in itself to understanding it, so we can move forward as a whole for this community. Any last words?
Great job to you all as well. Thank you for putting this together.
Thank you. And thanks to the Urban League, Mrs. Finley, Dr. Danford, the entire team. I mean, what a great opportunity. And we got work to do. So I'm going to be reaching out to all of us brothers. Let's get together and support each other. So this is such an awesome connection to have made.
Totally.
Can I say something?
Really
All right.
Can y'all hear me?
It sounds like we.
Yes.
Can I say something? It was very convenient for that to go down at about 5:30 today. And also they closed EWC's polling place.
That is correct.
Are they going to be reopening it for the election, or are we going to have to go to Gateway?
They will not be reopening that location. The reason being, it was not part of the primary location, which it's a lot of political, and they, according to Mr. Hogan, there is nothing we can do about it legally because it just was not added. So the location for UNF and EWC will not be added to the early voting locations.
I mean, voting day. Is it going to be there for voting day? November 3rd.
No, sir.
So we're going to have to go to Gateway.
Yes, sir.
That's a big disadvantage for a lot of people in this area. A lot of
And
people in this area are elderly, you know, and a lot of them don't drive. So that's very inconvenient.
That is 100%.
Mr. Ford.
So, and are you aware of our lift codes?
Right. Yeah.
So, George, if you don't know, the National Urban League has passed out a number of lift codes, Uber lift codes.
Okay.
And so for anyone that needs a ride to the poll, reach out to whoever your affiliate.
That Urban League, we have them at our disposal to provide anyone in the community.
And
okay.
Let me clarify this as well. I want to make sure it is not an early voting location, but the Shell Suite Community Services Center on the campus of Edward Waters College is a polling location. So on election day, if that is your precinct, then you can vote there. It's just not available for early voting.
Well, see,
let's clarify that.
Well, you saying that she said it wasn't going to be there.
No. I'm telling you, it is not an early voting site, but I know for a fact, and the reason being because it was also a polling location in August where we just had a primary there. So they can't change unless there is some reason the building falls down. There are rules that are set in place. It on election day is certified by the supervisor of elections office as a voting location. It is just not certified as an early voting site for this time.
Thank you for clarifying that, sir.
Sure, sure.
All right.
Okay.
I'm also a student of EWC. I'm one of his students.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me tell you, that one keeps me on my toes. I'm just saying. Good to see you, Mr. Ford.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes,
It's
sir.
the one thing y'all didn't speculate on or didn't espouse on is why a lot of black men don't vote. And the reason being is because it was over 1 million men that was denied voting rights up until a couple of years ago. And then they passed the law, and then they passed another law. Then they passed another law that we could vote. That's when I got my voting rights back. And then they took it back. So you couldn't vote. So it's 77,000 that can't vote, but want to vote.
That's solid, George.
And I appreciate you sharing your story. And he is not, it's not the exception. There's so many of them. I'm grateful, at least in this community. I know I've been involved in George and others in working to get people who had to get their rights restored. But there's so many organizations, including specifically, and I know I was involved with Jeff Green and Michael Bloomberg, who have been paying the restitution of former convicted felons so they can vote. So we're grateful to those organizations. And we have to do our part to help people when they come and say, hey, I don't know whether I can vote or not. Let's try. So George, good info, and thank you.
And
George,
they try to indict him for that. They're trying to indict Bloomberg for the money that he donated.
Yeah.
George, now if you know anyone that needs a lift code, I can provide you with the number and an address to the Urban League here in Jacksonville. They can reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to provide them with the code.
Well, as I get around the neighborhood, which I don't do a lot because I have too much homework to do, but if I run into the problem on my end, I will reach out to you.
Okay, great. That's
Is
greatly
that
appreciated.
and for that, if we could get that as well, so we could publicize it at Edward Waters College. I mean, I know that sometimes that there are people who are in the community, and we have different ones that I know I've sent out from other organizations, but so that we have a clearinghouse. I can't tell you how many people just call EWC and ask questions about the process or what have you. And that's part of our job in the academy, as to be that clearinghouse. So whatever info you all pass it on, please.
Since we are live, the phone number to the local office is 904-723-4007. And the address is 903 West Union Street. And if you visit our Facebook page as well, you'll be able to find more information on any events we may be having, a contact number, email to where you'll be able to contact someone directly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that address ID?
Say that one more time.
Is that address
the Urban League?
Yes, that is the address to the Urban League here in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Thanks again, Errica.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. If there's any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me. I'm here for you, at your disposal, okay?
Outstanding.
Good to work with you.
Thank you so much.
You well.
Take care, all of you.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.